All right, Coach Kevin here. Good morning, good morning, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and hop in and share my screen here. And here we go. First thing I'd like to do is share with you guys how to stay in touch with us. And I'm going to go ahead and show you that we have a Facebook group here. It's called Daily Law of Attraction Training and Support with Coach Kevin. Again, that is Daily Law of Attraction Training and Support with Coach Kevin. And you can come find us at facebook.com/groups/Daily Law of Attraction Training. So this is where you can find us and join us. This is where we are archiving the classes, as you can see here. As we record them, they're being posted. And so you can go back and review ones that you have not seen yet. And this is also a place where we can interact outside of the 30 minutes or so a day that we have together in the mornings. Next thing I would like to share with you, is, let's see here. We are currently in the process of going through a book called The Jackrabbit Factor. And you can get a copy of it very easily if you will type in, so we're actually Jackrabbit Factor ebook 8.0. Anyhow, we're on page 40. This book you can find very easily by going to Google, type in Jackrabbit Factor PDF or Jackrabbit Factor free PDF or free ebook or whatever, and you'll be able to find it. It was written by Leslie Householder. Leslie Householder, once upon a time, was a trainer of mine and a mentor of mine and definitely a good friend. And she is the author of this book. She was trained in the law of attraction by a gentleman by the name of Bob Proctor. Bob Proctor, if you don't know who he is, he's highly, he's highlighted heavily in the books The Secret, in the movie The Secret. He also has a book of his own called You Were Born Rich. And I also have been coached by Bob Proctor and have gone through his program to become a coach for his programs. And since then, I've gone independent and now do my own coaching. So, but Leslie wrote this book. You can get it for free. And it's written in a different format than normal. It's in story format. What she's done is created an allegory, a story, and has put characters in here that represent different people. And as far as the story, yes, it's a fictional story, but it follows a lot of Leslie and her husband Trevin's life and the way it was prior to them having success, manifesting what they wanted using the law of attraction. But now they have done so and share it with others, and so do I. So I'm sharing this book with you, and we're going to hop into chapter 9 because that's where we're at today. The giveaway. Here we go. Andy Zoff turned to Richard and said, "Do you want to see why our thinking has everything to do with the degree of success we enjoy?" Intrigued, Richard glanced at 3 others who stood near him, smiling. They obviously couldn't wait to witness Richard's reaction. Without another word, Andy gathered up all of the rabbits from the group and held them securely in both hands. He had 5 rabbits. The other participants in this scheme made themselves comfortable on the ground next to each other, facing the path. If there had been bleachers, Richard was sure by the eager look on their faces that they would have been on the front row with hot dogs and soda in hand. With uncertainty, Richard chose to sit beside them. Andy asked Richard, "Which one of those people on the path do you think would like some rabbits today?" Richard's eyes grew wide. What? What are you going to do? Just pick someone. Okay. How about that guy? Richard pointed to a very average-looking fellow wearing khaki pants and a polo shirt with a "too cool for you" strut. Fine. Now watch this. Andy took the rabbits, and walking away from his friends, he stepped onto the path directly in front of the khaki pants man. "Excuse me a minute, I have something to give you." "Out of my way, punk," The khaki pants man pushed Andy aside and walked on. Turning to Richard, Andy hollered, "Pick someone else." Richard pointed to a thin man in a suit and glasses. Andy stepped in front of the thin man. "Excuse me, sir, I have something to give you." The thin man stopped and eyed the rabbit man suspiciously and said, "What?" There's no modulation in his voice whatsoever. "You are the lucky recipient today of 5 fine rabbits." "What's it going to cost me?" The thin man's voice remained monotone and somewhat irritated. "Nothing whatsoever, no strings attached. I'm just conducting an experiment." "No thanks." The thin man put his hand and hurried away. Looking back at the crew who sat at the side of the path, Andy raised his shoulders as if seeking further input. Richard held out his hand, palms up, as if to say, "You choose." So Andy stood in the path and called out, "Free rabbits, 5 fine free rabbits." But people just looked at him oddly and walked past. Finally, he hollered, "Today's jackpot is 5 fine rabbits. Who's got a lottery ticket?" With that, quite a few people frantically searched their pockets and approached him, shaking their tickets and chattering excitedly. Looking back at his comrades, Andy saw they were doubled over in laughter. Richard was stunned. Andy arbitrarily snatched someone's ticket and said, "You're the lucky one." Then he put all 10 rabbit ears in one hand and offered them to the jumping, screaming winner. The winner awkwardly took hold of the 10 rabbit ears and panted excitedly. The others on the path had mixed reactions. Some cheered him and stayed close, offering to help and declaring their lifelong friendship, while others cussed and grumbled and stormed away. Returning to his friends empty-handed, Andy parked himself on the ground, obviously not finished with his investigation. Richard was amazed that these rabbits people would sacrifice such Richard was amazed that these rabbits people would sacrifice such a valuable commodity for the sake of an experiment on his behalf. Somewhere in the cloud of dust, the winner was surrounded by the crowds of people who had gathered. Quite a commotion ensued, and even cameras flashed from reporters who'd been drawn to the scene and couldn't wait to get their story on the front page of the morning paper. Then out from under the throngs of people scampered a rabbit that had escaped the madness. Hopping off the path and into the grass, it actually approached Colin and stopped directly in front of him. Colin reached out and took hold of the rabbit, and the others patted him on the back. One by one, the rabbits returned. Richard was utterly speechless. Once all the rabbits were back, Richard looked toward the path and saw that the crowd had disappeared. The only one left was the winner, moping empty-handed and searching for a paper sack. It was a depressing sight. Richard didn't like the way this scene made him feel. Sensing Richard's concern, Andy nodded. "I know how you're feeling. Believe me, this is the most frustrating part about owning a heightened awareness of the laws. It's painful to see how blind others can be, especially when it doesn't have to be that way. That man can have all the rabbits he wants, but he has to change the way he thinks. Some people have to hit rock bottom before they're humble enough to start asking the right questions. Couldn't we just teach him how to think, help him succeed? Believe me, I've tried with many a sack collector and even a few rabbit owners who got their rabbits in cutthroat ways. But most people just aren't interested in what I have to say. And those who are interested tend not to believe me. Only people who want the knowledge desperately enough seem to listen to me and apply what I teach. They have to want the knowledge at least as much as they want food." It all came together for Richard now. The sandwich. You had to find out how badly I wanted this knowledge, didn't you? You probably weren't even hungry, were you? Well, actually I was, but you're right. I had to know if you were going to waste my time or not, and if you're going to waste your own time or not. Without considerable sacrifice, people just don't seem to follow through. That is why I started asking for sandwiches. Some people see it as greedy, but in reality, I'm doing them a favor. The 3 comrades stood, and Andy shook their hands from his sitting position and said, "Thank you for your help." They each smiled and said, "My pleasure," or "No problem." Richard spoke slowly as if to himself. Greedy? Greedy to ask for a sandwich so that he can change someone's life? Richard wasn't sure what he thought about that. Having overheard Richard's mumbling, Andy said, "It's as though I have plenty of water, fertilizer, and sunshine that I'll gladly pour out on anyone's ground. But if they're so tight-fisted that they won't put their measly seed in the soil, all that I have to offer will be wasted." Okay, I've heard something like that before. What you send out comes back to you, or that what you sow, so shall you reap. Is that what this is all about? Yep, but you have to be careful with that cliche. Too many people try to apply the principle improperly, and the money never comes back to them. Then they wonder why it didn't work and lose faith that it is a valid promise. There's a fine line between a sacrifice or investment and gambling. Make sure you know the difference. So I suppose an investment in knowledge that empowers me somehow is a true investment, while a lottery ticket is gambling. Yes, that is one of the more obvious distinctions. Still, there are less obvious forms of gambling too. Richard leaned back on his elbows and waited for the explanation. Andy continued, "Have you ever made a huge sacrifice for some kind of venture based solely on someone's recommendation? Maybe an advertisement or a well-meaning friend or relative?" "Oh boy, more times than I'd like to admit." Richard threw his head back and grimaced. "What were you sacrificing for?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, specifically, why did you make the sacrifice? What did you expect to get out of it? What specific things were you going to do with the profits? How is it going to feel to enjoy those profits? About how long did you think you'd have to wait before you'd be able to harvest the profits?" Andy was leaning forward, throwing the questions at Richard in rapid fire, with an obvious tone of accusation. He knew full well that Richard had not taken the time to think through these details before making the so-called investment. Richard was feeling somewhat cornered. Sheepishly, he responded, "Oh, heck, I didn't think too much about any of that. I just trusted that the people knew what they were talking about and that each of the ventures promised to make me a bunch of money. Their ideas honestly made a lot of sense to me." That, my friend, was gambling. I don't doubt that the people probably knew what they were doing. I suspect they had those questions nailed down solid for themselves, and they probably did make a ton of money. But you're the one who didn't see your own rabbit, and you're the fool who jumped, barked, and chased nothing but air. Richard sighed. This awareness was depressing him, actually. Trying to divert such uncomfortable focus on his past foolishness, he changed the subject back to his most recent smart investment. "Well, in case you're concerned about the sandwich thing, I'm really not put out by that. I'll do it again if I had to. You've taught me how to fish, for Pete's sake, and you can't put a price tag on that. Half of a sandwich? Sheesh, what a bargain." Andy kindly consented to the diversion. "That's right, you have come a long way. Forgive my attack on your past decisions. I just wanted to emphasize the importance of having your own dreams and goals vividly defined before taking action in an investment or business venture. With your dream securely in place, you will be steered by a higher power toward the right decisions for you." Hey, I'm okay with that. I've just experienced a little growing pain to face the fact that I haven't been all that wise with those kinds of things. But you're on your way now, and that's what matters. I'm on my way now. That's right. Richard stood up and extended his hand. "Well, I'm awfully grateful and can hardly wait to get started. Remember, whatever you need to accomplish your goal will be drawn to you once you've planted the seed in your mind. Plant it, get emotional about it, be grateful for it, and know that all things that you will need are literally approaching, just like the elements to the tree seed." He smiled. "Now, my fine friend, I'm really happy to know you, and I wish you the best. I'm going now to have my own dream fulfilled. My family is waiting for my arrival as we speak." With a smile, he saluted Richard and held up the rabbit in a gesture meaning goodbye. Richard smiled and saluted him back. Thank you and God bless. And we're going to keep going. Chapter 10, The Catch. Richard couldn't seem to wipe the grin off his face. He knew that it was actually in his own control to achieve his goal. No longer did his success depend upon whether a rabbit happened to come along. He didn't need to hope the circumstances would be in his favor. He didn't need to worry if he would be fast enough or smart enough or better than the next guy. Success was completely within his control. Competition was unnecessary because enough rabbits abound for everyone. And if the rabbits ever ran out, more would be created. God had provided and would continue to provide plenty to all who believed in abundance. In fact, he was getting hungry, so he returned briefly to the path to get himself another sack with a sandwich and realized with gratitude that God even provided an abundance of sacks on the path. He deduced if every person without a sack truly believed they would find one, and if they literally was not enough to go around, more would be created by God's law. Believing in plenty made it possible for Richard to always see more. He remembered the blonde competitor and wished he could give him a shot of belief, because the act of willful belief would have actually opened his eyes to what had been around him the whole time. Richard laughed joyfully out loud. I believe in abundance. There is no such thing as lack. There is only abundance. He was energized. He felt so hopeless for so long that having this new awareness caused him to drop to his knees, arms spread with his face to the sky, overcome with gratitude because he knew how to provide for his family. No matter what the circumstances, he realized, no matter what the circumstances are, I can always choose my own thoughts. These new ideas were utterly astonishing to him. He sat back on his heels and took a moment to enjoy the entire sandwich, one grateful bite at a time. While still on his knees, his heart swelled with the feeling of gratitude, and he envisioned with his eyes closed the rabbit he hoped to capture. Dear God, will you please grant me a rabbit? This time he put in extra effort to add detail in his mind. He made the rabbit well defined, and it was beautiful, with long, graceful ears and suede-like fur. He could see every detail of the creature, right down to the tiny white fuzz on the edges of its ears, and the strong sloping back and puffy white tail. Finally, he expressed gratitude for it as though it was already his. Thank you for this wonderful rabbit I now have. He opened his eyes slowly, but nothing was there. It didn't work. I did what he said, and there's no rabbit here. Richard felt a twinge of disappointment, but consciously applied the proper laws of thought, which he had just learned. He closed his eyes again and thought, it's already mine, and I know that as I choose to believe, it is actually approaching. God help me know what to do and where to go so that I can do my part. Richard opened his eyes and still did not see a rabbit, but he smiled anyway, because he knew it was only a matter of time, so long as he continued to believe. Okay, God, tell me what to do. I'm ready to follow your instructions. Richard truly expected to hear something, perhaps a booming voice from the clouds, or an angelic musical whisper in his ear, but he heard nothing. Maybe the inspiration would come as words to his mind, but since he perceived no communication from deity, he decided to just get up and start walking. After all, he knew for a fact that you can't steer a parked car. As he walked, a thought did come to him that his idea to simply start walking could very well have been the inspiration he was looking for. It was a strange thought because he had expected something much more dramatic to get his attention. Rather, he chose to trust in the imperceptible guidance. He gave God the credit for getting him up off the stump. It just felt right to do so. And now that he had shifted himself into first gear, he trusted that God had the steering wheel. His job was to roll. God's job was to steer. The grass was especially tall now, where he walked, and he pushed it out of his way with each step. Before long, he pushed aside another thick wave of grass, and there in front of him sat the most beautiful rabbit he'd ever seen, just as he had imagined. The long ears were graceful and looked like the finest gray-brown suede. He noticed the color inside the ears was soft and white. Tiny white fuzz lined the rims and even glowed in the lowering sun. The rabbit breathed slowly. There was no hint that it was weary. Richard's eyes followed the hunch of the rabbit's back as it sloped to a beautiful white tail. He looked into its eyes, and it held Richard's gaze. It was as though it was challenging him to succeed. How uncanny it seemed that it had actually just barely come out of the hole where it hid, only inches away. Amazed, Richard did not restrain his excitement and lurched forward, startling the rabbit. Did he see disappointment in the hare's eyes? It seemed as if the rabbit was saying, "You want it to be harder than it has to be? All right, I'll make it harder." It darted away and Richard ran after it. Diving for it, he caught hold of its foot, but it was trying to scamper so fiercely that he lost his grip. And rolling over, he leapt again to try and grab it. It was quick and he missed. The rabbit didn't seem frantic, but rather like it was goading him. Richard had a fleeting thought that he didn't deserve the fine rabbit, but giving up at this point was not an option. He jumped and darted, chased it hard, and finally he had it by its ears. Panting, he stood up and turned to hear a faint chattering. He saw a woman near the path, actually with one foot on and one foot off, whispering to the child on her back. The man looked insane and they'd better hurry on. Richard grinned, realizing she hadn't been able to see the object of his pursuit, and held up the rabbit to show her why the madness. Shaking her head, she rolled her eyes and patted her babe's hand and resolutely turned to the path. "Show off," he heard her say. Chapter 10, The Catch. All right. We are going to, let's see here. Oh, that was short. Okay, we'll do that. Chapter 10, The Catch. Richard felt sad. He also felt like he was out of breath. This was a serious workout. It couldn't take too much more of that, or I couldn't take too much more of that. But at last I got him. I got him. Felicity, I'm coming home. In the forest, the snake spotted a squirrel. It turned, then quietly slithered off Richard's chest and wrapped itself around the trunk of the tree, creeping upward in pursuit. So we're on chapter 11, and we will start that up tomorrow. And good morning, Joseph, and good morning, Valerie.
Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
No, I'm good, thanks.
Okay, cool. How about you, Joseph? Okie dokie. We will call it a day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.